Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Sarah Peterson, and I'm going to be hosting this EA Zoom meeting on Asteroid Lucifer, which is a really controversial archetype. And I feel, though, as somebody who has a really strong Lucifer archetype, at least as far as what I see astrologically, and also how I feel that, as a person, and through my personal growth, I feel that this asteroid could be used to really open up our intentional evolutionary path. So that's I'm going to be talking about the archetype today, maybe some misconceptions, ways that we can look at it when we're using it in astrology. And yeah, I hope that you get something useful so that perhaps you can use it yourself or for your clients. All right. So today, this is what I'm going to be going over here. So we're going to have a little bit of a look at the concept of evil through the archetype of Lucifer. I'm going to find out if Lucifer is friend or foe, or maybe somewhere in between. As well, I want to talk about the archetype as seen from a modern day perspective and maybe some of the implications of that on an individual and perhaps a larger scale. We'll be exploring that. And also I have Lucifer's discovery chart, and I thought that maybe if I have time, I might have a little poke around at Donald Trump's natal chart from a Luciferian perspective as well. I feel that the discovery chart, when I was looking at it, I feel that it can impart some really good information for us to understand perhaps where Lucifer currently is in its evolutionary journey, we could say, towards back towards source, and also give us some insight into how we could use this current level of being, this Lucifer archetype, to help us understand how Lucifer's manifesting and can be utilized in our own natal charts or other types of charts, depending on what type of astrologer you are. So a little bit about myself. I'm a lot of things. I'm an astrologer by trade. It's my day job, but I'm also a psychic guidance counselor. I also train and teach psychic intuitive development, a bit of a reluctant artist and reluctant musician, coming late to the game on that one. And I am a fallible as heck human being, definitely that. So why I'm here, though, is I really want to contribute my knowledge of astrology, and also I work a lot in shadow work as well. And I feel that Lucifer might be a bit misunderstood, much like the shadows. So what I'm hoping to impart through this talk really is to help us understand how important it really is to be ourselves and to really accept all parts of ourselves, even the parts that maybe are uncomfortable and perhaps potentially even repulsive to look at. Decolonization of the mind and of people and society it's been coming up more and more in this modern age, and I've been finding myself being called more and more to focus on this in my work. And so I feel like looking at dark sides of ourselves through archetypes like Lucifer or Lilith or something like that, these types of things. And of course, there's other avenues to get the same kind of information, but I like to look at it these ways, through these archetypes. Obtaining knowledge about who we are from this archetypal or these archetypal lenses, I guess you could say. We learn so much about who it is we really are. And when we look deep into these dark parts of us, there really is great wisdom to be derived, especially through the Lucifer archetype, because it's a lot more complex than I think most people would assume it to be. All right, so let's begin. So first I want to start by talking about just the basic story that most of us know about Lucifer, which was, he was a prideful angel. Some assert that he was an archangel. Some say he was a cherubim, I believe, which are different classes of angels. I honestly, it's hard to say. I've done a lot of research on this for this talk specifically, and it seems to me no one can really pin down exactly what type of angel he was, but regardless, what seemed to be ubiquitous among the lore was that this entity was the most beautiful, the most gifted and talented. Really, we could say, some said God's favorite, but I think maybe one of God's most favorite creations, we could call it. But I think what came with that, knowing that knowledge and even being in that role, some hubris started seeping into Lucifer's cognition, and he got to a point where he decided to that he knew more than God, that maybe he was smarter than God. I won't say one way or the other whether or not that's true. I have no idea. But apparently, God disagreed. What happened was God did want Lucifer to bow before man, essentially, and he refused seeing them as lower beings, and didn't feel them worthy of it, of his, I guess you could say, regard, respect, compassion, and care. And so God did not agree with that, and showed Lucifer the door, as we all know, although in some lore, I have heard that he chose to leave. So it was more of a mutual parting over a disagreement that was irreconcilable, I guess we could say. So from then on, he became the adversary of man, in the lore, generally hell-bent on evil and corruption of man's soul. And it seems, from what I understand of the archetype or the asteroid Lucifer, much of this archetypal information and lore really does apply to how the asteroid can be read in a natal chart, a synastry chart, composite, whatever kind of chart. I'm sure it's only limited to our imaginations. So I also wanted to talk about a man's exile from the Garden of Eden, because I feel that since we do look at Lucifer through the scope of astrology, but also of being humans that we are, it's important, I think, to see and understand a little bit about this lore as well, because it shows our connection, or at least, our beginnings, the beginnings of our connection to Lucifer and what happened there. And of course, most of us understand this story. And it was, Satan. I believe it was Satan in the Bible that they refer to him as. I don't believe that Lucifer was used in any of the passages. It was Satan, as far as I know, or perhaps the devil. In any case, he tempted Eve to eat from the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil, I believe it was called. And he used a really convincing argument. It was like, well, you'll get to know everything God knows. I mean, don't you want to know? And so she was like, and plus it's delicious, he says. So she's like, okay, let's go there. And she takes the apple and eats it. And she shares it with Adam, And when God finds out, he gets so upset that he asks, well, why did you do it? Before he cast them out, he asked why. And Adam and Eve, well, they blamed each other. They're all pointing fingers at each other and at the snake and these types of things. And all three of them get punished, from what I understand, and they all end up leaving, or at least Adam and Eve were definitely cast out. But the thing is that from what I can tell of this story, it seems as though they made their own choice to eat that fruit. And sure, they were naive in making that choice. But at the same time, we're all imperfect and we make mistakes. And I think this shows a mistake that we could liken to Lucifer, and we could even perhaps liken to God or Source. And I want to see if I can articulate what that is exactly, clearly. I think what it is really is that we're all imperfect, and we're all trying to reach a state of maybe not perfection as far as our ideal is, but a state of evolution that is closer to perfect than where we're currently at. I see this story, and also the story of the fall of Lucifer, as holding some pretty powerful parallels. Even though Lucifer generally, it seems as though he had such hate for humanity, really there's some major similarities between us both. And I think secretly there was envy towards humanity and to that end. So moving on, let's look at some common misconceptions of the Lucifer archetype. So Satan and the devil, etc. There is some misconceptions there, just as far as, well, I wouldn't say misconceptions, but more like disagreements as to whether or not this is the case, whether or not Lucifer actually is Satan or the devil. Although it does, there's a lot of arguments in the Bible or like that people have asserted that can link them together, the archetypes, especially after the fall, the Garden of Eden story, because the snake actually wasn't really a snake until after he was caught. He lost his limbs. It was almost like even further shaming, not just being cast out from heaven, but losing your limbs as well and having to wander the earth on your belly. Just the levels of emasculation. I could see perhaps becoming an entity like Satan or the devil as a result. So there's a good argument for that. Inherently a bad guy, Lucifer. This is a tough one. This is a misconception I feel that is detrimental to us using the asteroid archetype to the best of our benefit in astrology, because although inherently, like on a deep level, he does want to corrupt and bring people down to his level, I don't necessarily know if that makes an entity bad. I think it's more complex than that. Seeking vengeance for the sake of vengeance and hateful. Again, I think that the Lucifer archetype is much more complex than that. I think there's a lot more going on. And really at its core, it feels like a child wound to me. I feel like it's a lack of recognition wound. Dad didn't see me. Dad didn't really hear me, didn't respect me. I think it goes much deeper. So hates humans, hates humanity. Humans are unworthy of praise. Yet somehow he seems obsessed with our downfall. So it's like if I just feel that there's an incongruency there, a discrepancy in how could you have hate for something that you're so obsessed with to the point of your own downfall. On some level, I feel like even the complex psychology of this archetype can show us that it shows us that part of us too. I feel when we look at other humans and cut away the humanity in them and we don't see them as equals. This happens all the time in our world with racism, xenophobia, classism, ableism, any of the isms where we kind of take the humanity out of each other and see each other as less than, So I see parallels there. Anti-God. Again, I feel that Lucifer actually really loves God and just feels so betrayed that he's so twisted and consumed with hatred that it appears as anti. And also another misconception is to best avoid the Lucifer altogether, like just stay out of the dark. Don't go there. It's not worth your while. You'll get sucked into the abyss and never be able to leave again. And as someone who has very strong, very, very strong contacts to Lucifer, to my moon, and my ascendant, I feel that that's a short-sighted way to look at it, because some of us are inherently kind of dark beings, especially if we've got like strong Pluto on top of that, Scorpio or whatever on top of that as well. Like it's these are parts that need to be accepted more than avoided, So let's see here. Is Lucifer's natural inclination to separate from God or goddess and bring you down with him? Well, I kind of feel like maybe when things started out, that's the way it was. But sometimes I wonder, because this world is so interesting, just the way that it even, this construct, a lot of us couldn't even explain if we tried what this construct is, where we are, and what the point of all of this is. And I feel that thought forms can potentially have life. So who knows if Lucifer's real or not, but regardless, these archetypes, not just Lucifer, but any mythological archetype, as we know, as astrologers, like they apply so thoroughly when we're reading people's charts that it's hard to ignore that, at least on an archetypal level, that these entities exist. You know, that's kind of how I see it, at least right now. And I feel as though in the beginning, perhaps Lucifer did have that vengeful, uncontrollable urge to pull us all down. But I'm almost wondering, you know, with the change of the ages, if perhaps there's a larger window for him to redeem himself, even through our own consciousness of what Lucifer actually is. Being, you know, outside of his hubris and pride, the real beauty and talent and grace that existed before all of the pride corrupted his own being, you know? So let's see, what else did I have to say here? Yeah, and even as individuals, we're so unfathomably complex. I feel like the more I study astrology, the more I realize just how true that really, really is. And so ways that Lucifer could be iterated through a person and their evil and their darkness and these kinds of things, but also where there's some really amazing talents and abilities underneath all of that corruption, if you can clean through that. Like the iterations, I sometimes I wonder, you know, what kind of potential could we see for growth and innovation in this world if more people could accept the darkness inside of them, and the shades and colors and textures of personal creative expression. I just wonder, you know, what that would look like. And of course, when we look at people's charts, there's so much more going on. So we want to be looking at a person's entire chart, but this extra shade here gives us a really, I feel, pertinent and potentially highly useful insight into, you know, real key aspects of our natural way of expressing ourselves. So yeah, I also mentioned here, you know, just as a thought game, imagine how Lucifer would iterate from a more conscious, and of course, from what I understand, Jeffrey Wolf Green says like evil's 99% unseen, or like basically mostly unseen. So we're fallible as humans. We're going to screw up. We're going to quote unquote sin, you know, and these kinds of. Oh, I got an echo there. I think it went away. But just imagine, I lost my place, sorry. I had some feedback there and it distracted me. But yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at this. Just imagine like what we could see as more conscious beings, and we're conscious of our, and really to be conscious of our evil, we need to listen to our conscience, which I feel is a natural endowment that we all have. We just, you know, some of us struggle to hear its voice as clearly as we could. But imagine what that would look like through the different signs with different planetary aspects and all these things. There's just the different colors of how this archetype could shine through someone. You know, it's funny because I sound like I am a very, like a huge cheerleader for this, but more than anything, what I'm a cheerleader of is people coming back to their own natural self. And sometimes that can be a little bit dangerous, or at least seem dangerous to us. We can be afraid because when we accept all parts of ourselves, especially something like the capacity for psychopathy or the capacity for evil or sadism or any of these things, you know, it can be, we can really, what can evoke inside of us or come about inside of us is that fear of being cast out from our tribe, or of death, or of expulsion. And so we'll continue to stay, you know, kind of like in status quo consensus reality, even though I really feel that the more we look at our dark parts, the less scary they really are. They're more human. We can see them as. So yeah, moving on. So how Lucifer manifests. So this is, you know, some information I've gathered on this, and some of it is from evolutionary astrology, of course, because a lot of the good information on the asteroid Lucifer shows up there. So through a desire to separate from source, and to separate, you know, just like completely from what I understand, even though there's like a drop of a desire still there, to return, the consumption of the pride of the Lucifer archetype is so strong that, you know, the vindictiveness, all that dark demonic stuff where it's just like this almost like sucking energy that's trying to pull everything down into a corrupted state, that's sort of how I envision that desire to separate from source as far as Lucifer goes. So in our daily lives, this can reveal itself in a number of ways. It's really hard to count how many ways a desire to separate or evil or corruption can really manifest, because some of it's very mundane, seemingly innocuous, right? Like, again, as Jeffrey Wolf Green would say, it's pretty much unseen, and I'm probably misquoting, but like 99% unseen evil, darkness, these things. So some examples, of course, are just something simple like lying, or withholding the truth, cowardice, exploiting others, killing, hating, avoiding, complacency, prejudice, abuses of all kinds, fascism. Like I said, we could really spend forever talking about how that could manifest. So I do think, though, that our individual sovereignty, this is part of my work. This is what I love doing, is helping people kind of connect to that royal dignity and sovereignty inside of ourselves, so that we can see each other as true equals, and I think that starts with seeing ourselves as what we truly are, and have more regard and respect for ourselves. And sometimes, like I was saying, when we think about really exemplifying those parts of ourselves, we shirk back, we shrink back, because it's scary, and when we see other people expressing light inside of themselves too, and when I say light, I don't necessarily mean soft, fluffy, pink clouds and unicorns light. What I mean is more like truth and bravery and courage, and just being you straight up, which sometimes will result in being offensive to someone, or saying something that is completely taboo and just unacceptable. Or just any kind of expression where we could see even to some people how they dress or present themselves can be an expression of their light, and sometimes even the way we dress can get a reaction from people if it's triggering shadows and darkness that is unrecognized in them. So it can be tough, because we, jealousy, envy, or any of these kinds of things are natural human emotions, right? So it's important to be conscious, I think. So when we're conscious of things like even our pride and our hubris and our feelings of maybe superiority, or since Lucifer can manifest in so many different ways depending on the sign, it could even be recognition of feeling like suicidal ideation, or delusions of just catastrophes coming from all corners whenever we think about following our dreams or being ourselves or something like that. When we recognize these things, that's really the first step, is just even seeing them. That's the thing about dark, is shedding light on it, But that's the thing is that I think on a deep level, and it depends on the individual, but I do think a lot of us do want to return home to source, or that place of peace, like the Garden of Eden, we could say, a place where the world is just a completely different place, utopia, even, we could use that word perhaps. And I feel that comes from coming back to recognizing who we are, because a lot of that type of a world is from our perception of what the world is, because we've got such a range of perceptions. We've got some people who see the world as completely horrible, and other people who see it as perfect. And, maybe there's delusions on both ends, but I think that's why it's important to get to know what's true for us and who we really are, so that we can get more objective about what our perception and experience is here in the world. I hope I'm not rambling too much and making sense here. That's the other thing too, is really accepting our gifts, seeing our gifts and accepting them in a balanced way. Because, of course, we're trying to glean the best of what Lucifer has to offer, and not fall into that abyss of darkness and, I guess we could say just evil inclinations, ways of being and thinking and doing. Yes, okay, so some examples of when our shadows are running the show here. Self-sabotage is a big one. That can definitely happen. I think that's mostly derived from cowardice, but of course that's part of the shadow, is fear, right? Fears can really keep us hooked in place. I mean, even during this presentation, as an example, my Lucifer, just to share, is in Leo in the 12th house, which is a pretty messy combination because although sometimes I'll have upswings of like, you know, just extreme confidence being in that 12th house, I also, you know, I'm so afraid of really exemplifying my gifts. Of my Lucifer and Leo is right next to my ascendant as well, so it has a real effect on my expression. And unconsciously, sometimes what will happen, just as an example, is if I'm just being myself unconsciously, and so running out of conditioning largely, what will happen is I'll forget my words, or I will feel less courageous. I'll feel more worried about other people's opinions, in from an arrogant place or from a place lacking in self-esteem. But when I'm conscious and I'm breathing, you know, and I'm just paying attention to my bodily sensations and being fully present in my body, I can exemplify more of my Lucifer, more of the light of my Lucifer and the wisdom that's really contained in there, from a place of consciousness instead of conditioned responses, you know, falling back on fear. Other things too, we conform to standards we perceive to be the law, so we won't question what the truth that we might be perceiving, because that's another thing about Lucifer, is he was sort of pointing out that the emperor had no clothes there at one point. You know, he didn't see the logic in acquiescing or you know, serving man, and perhaps he was wrong. But when we see how the archetype plays out in people, it seems to be the case that very often what this is showing is those parts of us where we do see something that needs to be brought to the attention of an authority that will put us in a position where we're questioning the authority. And so when the shadows are running, we're not really expressing that part. You know, we choose to kind of stay low. And so, of course, that does result in the suppression of the darkness that's existing in us just inherently, right? But the darkness does need to go somewhere. So because indoctrination and force of will, especially when it's antithetical to natural law, it's gonna, you know, the energy is gonna have to come out somewhere, basically. And so it can get projected out, or it can manifest or fester inside of the person. You can see this manifesting in a number of ways, like violence, exploitation, addiction, abuse, racism, low self-image, bullying, you know, being bullied or bullying others, and so on. Okay, so yeah, sometimes I think that when we get into the personal growth, embark on personal growth, especially when we're utilizing such incredibly deep tools like astrology, we may not realize what we're getting into as far as what we end up seeing about ourselves, you know, especially if we are the types of people that are really wanting to know ourselves thoroughly. So it's really important to get to know yourself very, very thoroughly, and understand too that to really come to know yourself, to really self-actualize, it takes courage. And it takes a lot of humility too, because, you know, we are only human, so we can be wrong quite a lot. So I say, instead of, you know, fighting our adversary, which we could see as Satan or Lucifer or darkness inside of us, I say instead get to know our adversary. It's a little bit smarter than fighting against something that's an inherent piece of us, from what I see anyways. Also, too, wanted to touch real briefly about, in our modern consensus reality, and Saturn, from an evolutionary astrology standpoint, from what I understand, Saturn rules like the consensus state, and that makes a lot of sense to me. It makes a lot of sense. And then I wonder, though, when we're living in a distorted consensus reality, distorted and antithetical to natural law, you know, what are some of the potential results in people, you know, who are in a consensus state or otherwise, really? And dissociation seems to be a really big one. And so what I mean by that, by dissociation, is because I do feel that it's a generational traumatic cycle that a lot of us have endured over a very long period of time. And one of the results that comes about in our bodies when we've experienced traumatizing events early on in life, or as a rule in life growing up, dissociation from the body becomes a thing where we're not as connected to our root and we go more into our head. And that can be really difficult when it comes to really coming back into ourselves and coming into a state of self-actualization, because we're not here on planet Earth, so it's hard to get down with real Saturn, real consensus reality. I wonder what that would look like. And when I say real, I don't mean like my vision of it. I mean something that's more connected and aligning with natural laws. Like, I wonder what that would look like. And I mentioned here too, just wondering about the Neptune and Pisces, because I feel like the dissociation has almost gotten to be becoming coping mechanisms for a lot of people. I don't know, many people who don't have an addiction of some form, something to cope and kind of get out of the body and not focus. And so, of course, the answer to that lies in Virgo, coming to take care of ourselves and take better care of our bodies and work to foster growth and nurturance. So, yes, a courageous approach to reconciling Saturn and Lucifer. I feel like conscious awareness of the cardinal angles is important, because that's how we approach life, through our cardinal energies, right? So it's a conscious awareness of the Aries Libra, self and other, really understanding that we're not an island and we do need other people. And that there's a balance to be struck there, but also between Cancer and Capricorn, which is about home, nation, land, our tribe, and also having the responsibility to grow into a full adult. Those cardinal angles really show us a way to kind of reconcile the demands of Saturn society, while still exemplifying our Luciferian traits in a way that is conscious. Conscious of our responsibilities, conscious of other people, conscious of empathy and compassion as well, for our family, our kin, which really is the whole of humanity. So acknowledging the sovereign in others as well, and also to knowing when to discern when it's appropriate to speak out, because the Capricorn archetype in tarot, the devil is also associated with this. And I feel that what that really means is I see a potential for Lucifer, the Luciferian aspects in us, to really mature and grow when we accept our responsibility to really come to master ourselves. In other words, at least from my interpretation, actualize. And of course, this is all just my opinion. And also to, of course, recognition that all beings are worthy of love and dignity, even the other people. So I still have, let me see here. Yeah, I'm quite a ways away, so I may not be able to go through everything, but I'll do my best. I just want to touch on, really at the bottom here, evil's favorite meal is our ignorance, pettiness, and cowardice. And we could say that that's probably Lucifer's favorite meal too, since Lucifer and evil are so intrinsically linked. And as somebody who self-admittedly, now this may shock some people, I don't mean to upset or trigger people, but for a good portion of my life, I would be in the range of what you might consider a secondary psychopath or sociopath. And during that time, as a coping mechanism for all the pain that I was feeling, some deep satisfaction came from things like misanthropy, and really feeding into the ignorance of just that blind jealousy or envy or any of these kinds of things, So I do think that it's important just to be aware of the parts of us that get fed from darkness, and be aware, is this productive? Is this helping humanity, myself? Is it healthy? Because no one's perfect, and more people than you think, a percentage of the population are experiencing symptoms of secondary psychopathy. So we need to be really just present with the darkness in us and be okay with that, and just have a conscious intention to, to connect to our conscience. And secondary psychopathy, I just want to be clear, is not inborn psychopathy, it's conditioned psychopathy. So it's quite different than primary psychopathy. So yes, and of course, I just wanted to bring this up too. When you're considering Lucifer in your chart and you're wondering, well, is it working for me? Is it not? A great rule of thumb is look at your life and see if your reality is mirroring what it is that you want, what you're intending to create. And look at, your relationships, your work, your health, all of these things. That'll give you a good indicator as to whether or not this archetype is working in your favor or not. And of course, we want to look at many other aspects in the chart. I just want to reiterate that, but we're just, focusing on the Lucifer angle from this talk here. And some more keywords and phrases to help you as well for understanding how Lucifer can be read in the chart. Things like confusion, lies and deceptions, separation, exclusion, and elitism. Because remember the pride thing, he really also too doesn't seem to have a lot of compassion and camaraderie with beings that he saw as lower than him. State of victimhood is another one though, and belief in one's own victimhood. Pride, God complex, hubris, arrogance. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry is another one, because again, this asteroid can show us where our hubris and delusions of grandeur are. So that's another phrase that could be useful. Critical thinking and thinking for yourself is another useful one. This one I like because this is one of the more positive ways we can look through the lens of Lucifer to kind of see maybe where we're suppressing that part of ourselves, where we're thinking for ourselves, speaking for ourselves, and thinking critically. So you have like outliers. Not conceding to authority, refusal to submit to the rules, which can be useful when our conscience calls for it. So that's, again, presence is important. Choosing to separate from dad, God, or authority rulers. We could say perhaps anarchy could even be a Luciferian archetype. Or keyword for the Luciferian archetype. Let's see. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Yeah, I wanted to look at this just for a moment here. Now, I want to say, like, when we're looking at a celebrity chart or a chart of a person that we can't really corroborate the information with, it's so important to see that this is just postulizing. If I'm using the right word, we're just, it's conjecture. We're just having a look. I just want to be very clear that I'm not diagnosing or delineating officially this chart. I just want to see some things or point out some things that I thought were interesting. So, and I'm pretty sure Donald Trump's chart, it's tough because some people say that this birth time isn't accurate, but I'm going to go with this one where he's got the Leo ascendant right there on very close to going into Virgo. You'll notice, and I'll mostly focusing on the Lucifer asteroid here, but you'll notice with Lucifer in Cancer in the 11th house, and also to just, like what we know of Donald Trump, which we can see through his sun in Gemini in the 10th house North Node and the Uranus, kind of Uranus and the sun hugging that North Node in Gemini. He was really meant to set himself apart and become reach some level of prominence or recognition and respect, and through talking and selling and, all of these types of things. But, and I'll get to Lucifer in a minute, but we also have the moon and in the South Node in Sag with Lilith and Sag in there too. So like I'm seeing indicators there that probably very early on, any dissent that he may have had was quelled pretty almost immediately by the narrative, the religious and philosophical narrative of the family and the tribe, right? But yet, I have to say, and especially with Saturn, well, geez, like we've got Saturn in the 11th house and then Jupiter in the 2nd house in Libra right next to Chiron. I kind of get the impression that, his own sense of values and fairness and understanding of equality even I think life circumstances and conditioning potentially really subverted Donald's ability to exemplify the real love and compassion that shows up in that Cancer signature that he has as well. I feel like he may have felt cast out, and when we look at Lucifer, you know, that being cast out is totally a key phrase of Lucifer. With his Lucifer and Cancer in the 11th house, I feel like maybe he always felt like an outsider, and so part of his hubris and his bravado and even his lack of compassion and empathy for a lot of people, it seems, you know, I feel like it may be because he doesn't see his darkness. It might help him to see an astrologer or study up on the Lucifer archetype if he were so inclined. But I kind of see that the coldness there, the shell around him that maybe was formed with everything else we're seeing in that chart with the Cancer signature of Saturn, and right next to his Venus, that soft, loving, you know, Venus in Cancer. And then, of course, with his mind being so impressionable on Cancer as well, in such a kind of a cold Aquarian house on top of that, you know, it must be a very lonely place to be. You know, I wonder if the reality he's living now is the one he intended to create. You know what I'm saying? So that was just interesting. I'd like to just real quick, if anyone had any comments about Donald's chart or anything like that, if you'd like to jump in, feel free. I just wanted to check in because I've been talking a ton. All right, let's move on. Okay, so this one here, yeah, let me see. So I wanted to look into just ways that the unconscious expression of Lucifer can come out through us in a variety of ways. The reason why I want to share this is it's good to know, because then we can kind of recognize these parts in ourselves and our clients or whoever we're reading for. So susceptibility to allow emotional weaknesses to determine your behavior, especially when you're in life-threatening situations. So that manifesting as greed, paralyzing guilt and shame, hubris, arrogance, lack of compassion is a really big one. Or the ability to empathize with others based on their race, or their gender, religious beliefs, sexual preference, favorite Pokemon I threw in there, just because the reason why I put that example in is it really can be as mundane as that. You know, it's just any place where we're kind of closing off our heart to others, you know, or even our ability to see the sovereign, the God, the divinity in others. Narcissism, violence, suppression, and fanaticism, theft and other behaviors antithetical to natural laws, and one's own intrinsic moral compass, which is a big one because we, you know, we want to hear the voice of our own conscience, not the voice of anyone telling us what our conscience is or what we should do. Although those things may align from time to time or very often, it's not ours, which is the important piece. Theft and other behaviors, I already said that. Manipulation, gaslighting, scapegoating, suicide ideation and self-harm, masochism, like I was saying earlier, sabotage and subterfuge, of course. Who wouldn't want to, you know, those always got to be put in such lists. Bigotry, prejudice, sadism, misanthropy, vindictiveness, vengefulness, sexual violence, coercion, pedophilia, which some people might debate, but I feel it fits here, at least at this point in our development. Complacency, listlessness, avoidance, procrastination, doing whatever is necessary to remain secure and comfortable to the detriment or the ignoring of your conscience. Over-identification with the ego, achievements, over-identification with the achievements as well, with beauty, that is a typo, your intelligence, your strength, anything that's superficial, really. And of course, this is not an exhaustive list. Let's see. Yes, so conscious expressions of the Lucifer traits. I wanted to show some examples of that as well because it's important to see both sides. Recognizing one's desire to return home, to admit that we were wrong and we really do want to go home. Were you ever a kid and maybe you said you were running away, but then you realized, you know, your warm bed was actually nicer than sleeping under a bridge. Did that ever happen to you? Sorry, don't mind me. Something similar, though, derivative of that. I think that we can empathize with that a lot of the time, where maybe we made a mistake and we want to go back. We want to be accepted back into the group, you know? Dispensing our truth, sharing that. And sometimes that can be unapologetic and requires us to be unapologetic and stand in a courageous place. And showing our true light and our true beauty and talent, you know, but doing so in a way that's humble and not and unassuming, because we want to be aware as well of our place. That might seem a little, I don't know if that's the right place or words, knowing our place, but I mean, you know, just full recognition that we are fallible, you know, far from perfect. So yeah, back to the point here, dispensing truth, light, and beauty with humility, and most of all, conscious awareness of natural laws and principles, and the respect and willingness to abide by those above anything else, really. But of course, actually, I shouldn't say above anything else, because at the end of the day, we want, I feel the Lucifer archetype is very much about being sovereign. So I feel, just to correct that, having conscious awareness of our own conscience as it fits into this construct of natural laws and principles. I feel that that makes more sense. The courage to say no and to stand firm in the light of truth, and the humility to cop to our failings, which can be a tough one sometimes, you know, but it is an important thing to do when we're really ready to come home, which, you know, I feel that a lot of us with strong Lucifer, you know, we're recognizing that. Sincere acceptance of our imperfections and recognition of our own inherent insignificance, which was what I was trying to say earlier. You know, we really are, this might be a tough pill to swallow, but we are inherently insignificant in a sense. And yet at the same time, of course, based on the law of polarity, we are significant. So it's a paradox in a sense. Awareness of the innate divinity in all of God's creatures, which was why Lucifer got kicked out in the first place, because he wasn't paying attention. I don't think he got it, you know. A rock, a speck of dust, a cloud in the sky, it doesn't, or an archangel that's the most talented and beautiful, it doesn't matter. They're all God's creations, which means they're all worthy inherently of, you know, just of being worthy. Connection to the conscience and a genuine willingness to live from it. Again, respect for natural law, so important. And so, yeah, I'd like to touch real briefly on the discovery chart for asteroid Lucifer, because I feel like there's some great wisdom there. And so I have notes on this I just want to have a quick peek at. So if we were to look at this discovery chart as encapsulating wisdom, the wisdom of what Lucifer really could be used as, the dark side and the light side, because of course we can't look at whether something's good or bad based on the chart alone. We can look at all the potentials. But I decided I just wanted to get a little insight maybe into Lucifer's consciousness at the time that this asteroid was discovered. And we have no known time on record, so I can't look at houses or angles, which is a bit of a bummer. But we're gonna go with what we can see. And so, of course, right away we'll go to Pluto, right? So Pluto is right conjunct up against Uranus in Virgo, which is really interesting because I see this as somebody who, at a deep level, does want to serve, does want to be a servant their own frickin' way, you know, the way that they see fit, the way that makes sense to them. They want to clean up and dust off and repair where they see is broken. And then right across from it, though, at the Pluto polarity point is Chiron in Pisces, which is very much, and it's retrograde no less, so it's very much, you know, mulling over itself big time. I could see this very much as almost like a, now there's many ways we could interpret this, but I'm basing this, you know, when I look at the Mars Leo and the Lucifer and being a very close trine to Lucifer retrograde in Aries, I feel like that Chiron may be hurting a little extra as far as victimhood goes. You know, there might be a petulance there where there is a bitterness, but yet that's where the desire of the soul is, you know, that's the resolution, as far as we can tell, is to come to accept his station. Because much like the archetype of Chiron, that, you know, you're not going to get back into heaven today. At least for the foreseeable future, the Lucifer archetype, or Lucifer, the entity, thought form, whatever you want to call it, it's stuck here, you know, which I'm sure can feel quite bitter, but yet I feel recognition of this state. And then thus through the archetype of Pisces, coming to really see the gift that comes through this, the gift of knowing what it means to be connected to everything, and even, you know, humans, that we're all kin, we're all one, and that we all are in a state on some level of suffering until we return home, you could say. So I just found that interesting, you know? And also too, when I look at Lucifer, the asteroid Lucifer in this chart being retrograde and in late Aries, so there's a bit of a Sagittarian shade to this. And then the south node of Chiron is right smack dab up against this asteroid here, with the north node of that of Chiron being in Libra. You know, what I'm really seeing is it's so important to be seeing other people's point of view, seeing the other side of the coin, listening to other people's experience. And even though we see that victim mentality or victim state, potentially when we look at this chart, you know, especially with Saturn there being a bit of an outsider in retrograde Aquarius, you know, feeling quite disconnected, there's a real benefit here from getting to hear other people and understanding and seeing the point of view of others, empathy, compassion, understanding, and just a willingness to connect. And then we've got, it looks like a yod between Saturn and Lucifer, pointing to that Virgo Venus, you know, and Virgo Venus late Virgo as well. So there's maybe a little bit of a shade of Taurus going on in there, all about service and values. And I feel like maybe resolving his values and his need for love and connection, and exemplifying his beauty and recognition of such things are coming from understanding that there's a heavy responsibility of being the outsider, especially an outsider who's kind of cast themselves out. You know, the light in that Aries Lucifer could really be recognition that you know, from what I understand, at least of Aries Lucifer, especially looking at it this way, that your own actions are what got you here. You know, and it was your own selfishness, or selfishness to the exclusion of the other that exists in the world, that got you here. And so to resolve that, you know, it's important to see and really come to value what service really is, especially humble service that is aligned with love and God and compassion and courage and truth, real truth, you know, not the lies, you know, that are so associated with Lucifer and deception. So there's a real ask for humility coming from this chart, I think, and also, you know, I didn't even look at the nodes. I didn't even talk about that, but also too, a willingness to share what you know, to not stick into your dogma, and you know, your pig-headedness and unwillingness maybe to hear how other people see the world or experience the world. Elitism as well, you know, Sagittarius can be a little bit of a, it can manifest itself as a bit of an elitist, especially when we're looking at like a Saturn in Aquarius kind of signature, and also knowing what we know of the Lucifer archetype on top of that, right? So let's see. Did I have much more? Yeah, just a little bit here, and then we'll wrap up. So yeah, I think Lucifer is really useful to use in astrology. We can get a lot of benefit from examining the archetype, but also being present with understanding that, it's not like we're trying to make friends and just like become like fully idolizing the concept of Lucifer. It's more about using the wisdom contained so that we can grow up and become more aware of the evil within us, so we can transmute that into consciousness, conscious evolution, as we feel called to, I guess, experience. So yeah. So you might still be saying to yourself, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to go there. We can do this other ways. I don't have to go the Lucifer route or darkness or Lilith or shadow route, which is cool. I mean, there's so many ways to reach resolution, I think, that, there's no one way to get there. I just personally identify and I think just connect to this archetype so much that I like what it has to share. So yeah, I do think though it's important to get to know what the face of evil really looks like. There's some abhorrent visions of what evil really is. We see it in the world. We've seen pictures, or at least those pictures are available for us to see if we have the stomach for it, and I don't recommend that. But, the face of evil can be disgustingly abhorrent. And so it's no wonder that instinctively we don't want to look at it. But for us to really grow in a balanced way that is closer to knowing what I feel to be like a clearer truth, is to go there, to look at that and see what the face of evil really is. And I'll tell you from personal experience, a lot of the time, the visage of evil is actually more abhorrent than the reality, especially when we're consciously choosing to transmute it into something else. Equanimity, awareness, and vigilance in shedding prejudice towards the creative self-expression and inherent right to exist that we all have. This studying this asteroid, that's what we can really cultivate. Of course, humility is such a big piece in this type of work, though. Humility and also courage. And those who are choosing to consciously and or willfully evolve in the current life that you're living right now, and also too, as an eternal soul like I have here, it's good to kind of see the themes here. I didn't have the nodes of Lucifer up in my chart there, but if you even added things like that into your delineation or your examination, you could really open up the evolutionary path, perhaps, of this archetype and how it's playing out through your life, from life to life to life, or at least from the previous life going forward. Let's see. And yeah, so this quote here, it's not about being the best, it's about being better than you were yesterday. I bring this up because this can seem daunting, where because it's like we can't just say, oh, I'm going to work on my evil. And then, in 2 months, I bench press that evil and now I'm, in perfect health. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but basically, we can't really expect it to go away tomorrow. I think it's a part of our lives, at least until, God has attained perfection. So we probably got a bit of a wait for that. And I think that it's important for us to just remember that personal growth and development in these things, we're plants. We're fractally unfolding and expanding. And the best way for that to unfold into a beautiful shape that is really resonating with the frequency of who we really are at a deep soul level in our spirit, it requires us to be patient and compassionate towards fostering our own growth and development, and that means accepting ourselves. And so, yeah, I call it the walk of shame back to heaven or truth. And I think that's mostly because of the archetype of Lucifer, because it does take a lot of cojones to say, especially after what he did, I mean, apparently he took 1/3 of the angels with him when he left, and it was a big brouhaha. So it might take a little bit of humble pie, really, really gulping down that humble pie and admitting, and we all I feel that applies to a lot of us a lot of the time, maybe when we've done something wrong that we perhaps want to hide or pretend never happened. But it is okay that, you know, because we do invariably screw up, as it says. But, you know, patience. And, you know, a lot of us do want to see the world change in a positive way, and that starts with us. And I think the best thing we can do is just do our best and really listen to our conscience, come back to ourselves. Don't be so mired in the consensus reality that at least most of us who respect natural law just understand inherently, intuitively, this consensus reality that we're currently living in is just so antithetical to natural law that it's so important. It can't be understated how important it is for us to listen to ourselves and trust ourselves and come back to our conscience. And so I believe that is, yes. This is, yeah, I always wanted to say too, remember to breathe and take your time. Go at your pace, you know, and respect the process. It's so, so important. So yeah, basically what I was saying, you know, is exemplified here. And I just want to say too, what it says here. Within the pits of your darkness bears the potential for incredible light. I know this from personal experience. And there's some very dark in me, but a lot of the dark that I've had the courage to look at and even speak about publicly and share with people has really helped me to heal a lot of this, and just the response has been wonderful in my mind, body, and emotions. So yeah, use Asteroid Lucifer as a beacon for coming to know like your true nature, and see yourself from an angle that has potential to give you incredible personal power in a way that you'll feel like you really are starting to come home, like really home, not corrupted. So yeah, that's all I have for now. Thank you so much, everybody. Did anyone have questions or anything?
Yes, I thought it was a very interesting lecture, and I'm very pleased that you have focused so much on the positive side of Lucifer. I think I have always had a tendency to see it more as the darkness and the negativity of but I was curious about like when you have some planet that is in conjunction with another person, Lucifer, how it will interact. Like, I mean, can we bring the good in that person, or does it necessarily activate the negative in that person?
So you're asking when you're looking at like a synastry chart and person A's sun is conjunct person B's Lucifer?
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to say just based on that much information, because this is why there's certain, from what I understand, there's certain things we need to consider, which would be, for instance, the development level of a person, like their self-awareness. How aware are they of their own shadows and darkness? Because that Lucifer could be being in a conjunction, constantly shedding light on a person, or it could be going, you know, in a more negative, influential direction, where we could be seeing, depending on the sign and the house placement of the natal Lucifer, we could be seeing all sorts of ways that could be iterated. It could be manipulation, it could be abuse, it could be even just like lies and manipulations, but it could be very subtle as well, because of course Lucifer can be quite subtle and also glamorous and alluring, you know, attractive. So it would depend, because even the sun person, you know, could even be shedding light on that on the person's Lucifer and making them aware of their Luciferian ways or traits that they might not be aware of.
Yeah, that's quite good. That's quite good. I really like that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of your meeting. That was really good, Sarah. Amazing. Thanks for traversing this taboo area. Very helpful for everybody. And would you all please thank Sarah Peterson, everybody?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great.
You're welcome.
Amazing.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.